Amen. And thank you, Justin and team. What a fantastic job. We just praise God for them this morning. You know, Jack London has written what is considered a classic American novel in the book Call of the Wild. And of course, if you went to public school, most kids at some point are at least encouraged to read this novel. But it's the story of a dog named Buck. And Buck had a pretty good life out on a ranch in California when he was stolen. At the time, there was a huge gold rush going on in the northwest corner of Canada in a place called Klondike, Yukon. Maybe you've heard of it. I know you've heard of the candy bar, but it's actually a place in northwest Canada. And so there was this huge rush on sled dogs. They didn't have enough sled dogs in order to fulfill all the needs that were going on because of the gold rush. And so Buck was stolen from his quiet, peaceful, tranquil life in California and taken all the way to Klondike, Yukon, in order to become a sled dog. And as the story goes, Buck becomes more and more primitive, more and more aggressive, more and more like a wild dog. And the way Jack London describes it is, Buck had to learn one thing. He had to learn to master or be mastered. Those were really his only two options in the literal dog-eat-dog world of sled dogs. And so Buck became more and more primitive and learned what it meant to be the master instead of the one being mastered. Well, the truth is, this morning we're going to talk about money. Now, I know everyone's excited now that you know we're going to talk about money this morning, but the truth about money, as God teaches, is money has the danger of being a master. Money has a way of drawing our hearts toward it. So even in the world, not of dogs, but of money, it's important that we learn to master it and avoid the danger of being mastered by it. Jesus talked about this danger of being mastered by money. It says, Jesus said, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." And the truth about money is money can be rather neutral. Money has the power to achieve great good, right? But money also has the power to draw us in to achieve great evil. So how do we know? How can we be sure that rather than being mastered by our money, we are actually mastering our money? Well, the truth is God's Word is full of good news, and it has good news and good help on the matter of money. We're in the middle of not the middle, but getting towards the end now, a series on the book of Proverbs. And Solomon in the book of Proverbs had a lot to say about mastering our money. So the first thing we're going to look at here is Solomon told us we master our money when we use it to honor God. Look at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 through 10. Proverbs 3, 9 through 10 says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine." So he starts out saying, "But honor the Lord with your wealth." And that word honor means to give great weight to or to give great substance to. It's kind of the opposite of a lightweight. You've heard the term lightweight. You know, you hear someone, they're complaining about something, or they're doing something, or they're challenging you to do something, and you say, "Well, I'm not worried about them. They're just kind of a lightweight." In other words, you just kind of brush them off as unimportant or uninfluential or whatever the case may be. Well, Solomon's saying when it comes to God, do the opposite of that. God is not a lightweight. God is a heavyweight. God deserves our honor. He deserves our respect. We value God. He has the right to have authority in our lives. That's why one of the first steps to become a follower of Jesus is what? To confess that Jesus is Lord, right? Romans 10:9 says, in order to even become a follower of Jesus, you have got to acknowledge that Jesus is Lord, that He's a heavyweight, that He has substance, that He's worthy of being in charge of our lives. So when Solomon says, honor the Lord with your wealth, what he's saying is show. When you say that Jesus is Lord, show that by the way you treat money. Show that by the way you spend money. Show that by the way that you earn money. Show that you really believe Jesus is Lord. Honor the Lord with your wealth. just a few verses up, we read just a few weeks ago, trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make straight your paths, right? One sign, one symptom that we really are trusting God in all of our ways is when we trust God with how we handle our money. But, Donna Summer was right. You remember 1983? He works hard for his money. And because of that, because we work hard for our money, sometimes it's hard to let go. Sometimes it's hard to trust because we feel like we've worked hard for it, and we have. We feel like we have earned it, and in some ways, with God's grace and God's favor, we have, but it's still difficult sometimes to let go. That word wealth, when he says, honor the Lord with your wealth, that doesn't just mean we hear wealth and we think wealthy, we think rich, we think prosperous, when in reality that word is simply, that's their income, that's their money, that's how they made their substance, that's how they supplied their needs and their life's needs. So that could be, money that you make, that could be income, that could be wages, that could be an allowance if you're a child and don't have a job yet. Honor the Lord with your income, with your money. And then he says, and with the first fruits of your produce. In other words, for the people in this time, the first fruits of their produce, when they offered that as an offering, that was their way of saying, God, we are grateful to you. We are acknowledging that all that we have is from you. God, these crops would not produce if not for your blessing, if not for your help, if not for your favor. So as an act of gratitude for how you have blessed us, as an act of acknowledging that we need you to make this happen, we cannot do this without you, God. So we are acknowledging you by the very first that we have, we are offering back to you. In other words, when we honor God with our wealth and with the first fruits of all our produce, when we give back to God first, when that is our first priority, when that is what we do before anything else, our tendency is to reverse that, isn't it? Our tendency is to kind of, buy the things we like. It's to pay our bills, to get the things that we need. And then we kind of look at the bottom line and we say, okay, what's left? Do we have anything left that we can give? And the truth is, when we take that approach, there's rarely enough left to give, right? But God commands us not to give out of the leftovers, but to give the first fruits, to give the very best. And that's true, yes, of our money, of our income. It's also true of our time and our energy and our talents as God gives us gifts and talents and time and money. He's saying, give back to me the very best portion of that. Give back to me first. And look at the results of what happens. It says, look, a barn will be filled with plenty, vats bursting with wine. In other words, he's letting them know when you honor God with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce, when you do that first, what you find is there's plenty left over. What you find is that God is going to meet your needs. Your needs will be met. When we start by honoring God, our needs are always met. So how do we do that? How do we give to God? I mean, we can't just, our income is not produce and it's not, grapes or wine. So what do we do with our money? One primary way in the New Testament is people gave to the local church. Look at Philippians chapter 4, verse 16. Paul is writing this to the Philippian church, and he's letting them know, I have received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. Paul is traveling the world to different churches, helping and ministering, and so he's taking up this collection, and the Philippians had sent him some money, and he writes back to them and thanks them. But listen to how he describes this money that they gave to him for ministry in the church. He describes it as a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and pleasing to God. So one way that we give back to God is through the local church. It's not the only way. There's other good gospel-centered ministries that also need support and need help. And we can give to those as well. But our first priority is the local church, out of which all other ministries come and are supported. But the principle there is that we honor God and He provides for our needs. Now there's a distortion of that, right? If you're familiar with the term the prosperity gospel, that's the idea that we give to God, and as a result of that, we get rich. In other words, we give a portion of our income to God, and God blesses us with this super prosperity, when in reality, that is a lie. That is not what the Scriptures teach. So why is this not the prosperity gospel? What is the difference between this truth and the prosperity gospel? One is, we believe that because God is sovereign, God determines His plans for us. We don't get to tell God what we want Him to do with our lives. And if God chooses us to live with meager or small means, that is fine. That is acceptable. God is sovereign. He has every right to do that. And we accept that gladly and with enthusiasm, knowing that God's plans for us are good. God's blessing to us is designed not to increase our personal wealth, but to increase our personal generosity. In other words, God gives to those who are generous. God gives to those who will continue to show compassion and generosity and help. It doesn't honor God when we treat God like an investment. If you're thinking, what's my ROI? What's my return on investment for my giving this week? That's not honoring to God. The goal, yes, is to honor God and to recognize Him as the one who provides all of our needs. And when we do that, we show God, yes, this is a person who is faithful, who treats their money in a way that honors me, so I can trust them. I will let them be stewards of more, because in reality, it's already God's, right? God owns it all already. So God is saying, who can I trust to steward my resources in a way that they'll be generous and that they'll be giving and compassionate and helpful to others? So our financial giving gives us two things. One, it gives us an opportunity to honor God, to show that, yes, Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord of my life, and Jesus is Lord of my finances. It gives us that opportunity. Our finances are also a great opportunity to evaluate. We're always thinking, do I trust God? Am I really committed to God? Do I really love God? Well, as we evaluate, what are we doing with our finances? What are we doing with our money? It should make it clear, not in a subjective, like, I think I trust God, but I'm not sure, but in a real, concrete way, because if we trust God, it will be reflected in how we handle our money and how we handle our finances. So ask ourselves this question together this morning. Are we honoring God with our finances? Are we honoring God? As God blesses us, are we giving back a portion in a way that makes it obvious that, yes, God, we honor you. We give great weight to you. We recognize your authority, and we trust you with every aspect of our lives, including our money. So another way that we can make sure that we are mastering our money instead of our money mastering us is when we see the good and the limitations of money. Look at Proverbs chapter 10, verse 15. It says, "A rich man's wealth is his strong city. The poverty of the poor is their ruin." Okay, so we need to acknowledge biblically, yes, there are dangers that go along with wealth. There are also dangers that go along with poverty, right? Poverty is not the goal. It says poverty of the poor is their ruin. So poverty is not the goal. We're not searching out to be poor. So if you're poor because maybe you were lazy, you didn't work hard, or maybe some people have this idealized look, if I can just get poor enough, then I'll find contentment and happiness in life. That is not the goal. Yes, the goal is to give. The goal is to be generous and to show compassion and to be content with whatever God gives us, which sometimes will be small and sometimes will be great, but understand that there's dangers that go along with poverty. There will be times in our lives and our circumstances when we have less than at other times. But what we can be sure of is God is always providing for our needs. So through the perspective that wealth should not be placed above honor, right? We honor God first, and that wealth cannot be trusted, right? We cannot trust our money. The only thing that we can trust is God Himself. But with that said, money can provide good things, right? If you slept under a roof last night, and I'm sure this weekend you were grateful that the vast majority of you slept under a roof, the reason you were able to do that is because God provided you with what? With income, with money, with the ability to have a house. If you ate, if you took transportation or drove a car, and I know God's having to provide a lot and lot more for transportation these days if we're going to sustain that. But if God provided for our medical needs, all of those things, God probably did in some sense through income or through money. So money does do some good. Money is not the enemy. Money is not evil, as long as we're learning to master it and not allow it to master us. So money does do some good, but it's limited. The Bible talks about many ways that money falls short of what we actually need. Look at Proverbs 11:4 for just one example. Proverbs 11:4 says, "Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." Now that word wrath means death, or it's the day that will face God's judgment. Hebrews 9:27 says, "It's appointed to man once to die, and then to face the judgment." And so what Solomon is telling us in that moment, your wealth is not going to do you any good. Your wealth is not going to sustain you when you are faced with God's judgment. But he says, but righteousness delivers from death. In other words, your wealth will do you no good. The only thing that will matter in that moment is not how much you've made or how much you've accumulated or what kind of car or house you've been able to buy or what kind of vacation you've been able to go on. The one thing that will matter is, are you clothed in the righteousness of Jesus? In other words, have you trusted not in your own goodness or your own diligence or your own hard work or your own accomplishments, but the only thing you're trusting in is what Jesus has done for us on the cross. When Jesus died on the cross, he was paying a penalty for our sin and saying, you know what, even though I have done no wrong, I'll take the punishment that they deserve, and the righteousness that I possess, I will clothe them in that. And that will sustain you. That will give you freedom and give you the ability to rejoice and enter into heaven's gates on the day of wrath, on the day of judgment. So wealth will fall short on the day of wrath. The only thing that will matter is, do you have a relationship with Jesus or do you not? So let's ask ourselves the question, what is the good that money is doing in your life that you can be grateful for? Because yes, money is a blessing and we should be grateful for it. We should thank God for the good things that it provides for us. But we also need to ask ourselves the questions, how aware are we of the limitations of money? Have we fallen trapped to the idea that money is the be-all, that it's everything that we need, when reality, in many, many cases, money will fall short. So we master our money when we see the good and the limitations. We also master our money when we acquire it through God's blessings. Look at Proverbs 10:22. It says, "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it." That word blessing means it comes from God. God is the one providing it. In other words, when we acquire wealth through God's blessing, then it doesn't come with all the tragedies and the temptations of ill-gotten gain. In other words, if you're acquiring wealth, but your family is falling apart, that's not a blessing from God. If you're acquiring wealth, but you've got enemies all over the place because of the way that you are acquiring it, that is not God blessing you with wealth. If you're acquiring wealth, but you're constantly fearful and afraid that it's all going to disappear because you've kind of gotten it through getting rich quickly rather than diligence and hard work, that's not the way God blesses us. So how do we know that our money, our income, our wealth is acquired through God's blessings? One, have we acquired it honestly? Proverbs 11:18 says, "The wicked earns deceptive wages, but one who sows righteousness gets a sure reward." In other words, are we hedging on the time card? Are we clocked in for a longer period of time than we're actually working? Are we wasting time while we're on the clock? And then Proverbs 11:1 says, A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. In other words, God delights. God finds pleasure when we do business and we do finances in a way that is honest and transparent and honors him. So one way to make sure that your income, your money, is a blessing from God is to acquire it honestly. Another way is to work diligently. In other words, to work hard, but also to work slow and to work steady. Proverbs 12:24 says, "The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor." Now, rule, it doesn't mean you're going to become a county commissioner or a president or a governor, but it means you are kind of in charge of your own domain. When you work diligently, the hand of the diligent rule, they are kind of in charge of their own circumstances. They're not constantly having to depend on somebody else for help. And then Proverbs 13:11 says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." In other words, say no to the get-rich-quick scheme, right? God says money, wealth is acquired slowly and with work and with diligence, right? So are you investing in the stock market to get rich quick? Well, if you think, you know what, I'm going to buy today because it's low, and then in a couple days I'm going to sell it when it's high, and then I'll be wealthy. Guess what? That's getting rich quick. But are you saying, you know, here's a business that I believe in. I believe in the leadership. I believe in the company. I believe in what they're doing. I believe they are doing good work and providing good services, and I believe they'll be doing it for a long time. So I'm going to invest a portion of my money into that business through stocks, but you're not expecting to get rich quick. You're expecting to acquire over the diligence of a well-run company over a period of time. That is diligence. You know, everybody wants to be in cryptocurrency today. You know, is cryptocurrency legit or is it get rich quick? I don't know. Ed Bradbury will tell you after class, after church today. See Ed Bradbury, and he'll tell you the truth about crypto. No, I have no idea, but I do know this. If you think you're going to buy crypto low today, and then in just a short period of time, you're going to sell it when it goes way up, and then you're going to be rich, that is get rich quick, and that is not biblical. That is not God's way. If you've researched and you've thought and you've come to the conclusion that, yes, crypto is where things are going, so for the long term, I want to invest in crypto. I'm not telling you to do that. But if you want to do that, at least start there where it's a long-term, slow, diligent acquisition of wealth. That is biblical. Again, the proverb says, "Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it." So if you do get rich quick, the downside is you're always going to be fearful of getting poor quick. And that is a real possibility. And then I love Proverbs 23:4-5. It didn't make the screen, so just listen carefully. Proverbs 23:4-5 says, "Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it's gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven." Now when it says, do not toil to acquire wealth, that's not a contradiction of diligent hard work. What that means is when you find yourself just exhausted and tired, and your priorities have kind of fallen apart in your life because you're giving every ounce of energy and time and effort and love that you have into acquiring wealth, he's saying at that moment, be discerning enough to desist, to back off, to understand that there's other priorities that you should be seeking. And he tells them why. He says, because when your eyes light on it, it's gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. If you're of the attitude that I've got to keep working and I can never take a break and I can never take a vacation and I can never go home because I've got to make more and more and more, what he's telling us is that it'll never be enough. That goal will always be flying away. You know, some currency has an eagle on it. Do you know the significance of the eagle? It's because currency has a tendency to fly away, to disappear, to get away from us. So work diligently, but that means hard but slow and steady. And then another way to assure that our income, that our wealth is a blessing from God is to avoid unnecessary debt. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. So if you're borrowing money to look more wealthy or to look richer than you actually are, that is a mistake. If you can't afford it, the Bible's clear. Don't buy it. We've all got to learn to live on less than our income. Make sure that we are spending less than is actually coming in. So we master our money when we acquire it through the blessing of God, and don't try to take shortcuts. We also master our money when we show generosity. Proverbs 11:24 says, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want." It seems paradoxical, right? It seems like that would be impossible, that the one who is giving freely is growing richer, and the one who is withholding is the one who is constantly in need. But the idea there is you can trust God. When God says be generous, when God says be compassionate, be kind, when God says, love your neighbor, we can trust him that when we do that, he is going to meet our needs. Literally, that word give freely means to scatter. It's almost the idea of just giving, just looking for every opportunity you can to help, to be generous. In other words, look for needs and meet those needs. And I know some people think, but how do I know if it's a legitimate need? And if that's you, and if that's your conviction, and you want to make sure that every need you give to is a legitimate and right need, then that's fine. But are you doing that? Or are we doing the hard work of finding those legitimate needs and meeting them? I also believe that sometimes we just won't know. Sometimes we just have to go, I'm just going to give and leave it in the hands of God and pray for my brother or my sister that they'll use it in a way that helps themselves and helps their family. But the bottom line is taking all excuses away. If we're not being generous, then we're not being who God created us to be. God created us to be generous. There's a statistic that says most people believe that they would be really ideally happy if they had 25% more than they currently have. And if that's you, if that's your mentality, then the truth is you will probably never be generous, because you're always thinking, if I just had a little bit more, then I would be happy. If I just had, just 25% more, at that point I would be happy and I would be able to begin to give, when in reality, being generous, giving, because it is paradoxical, is always going to be a matter of trust. It's never going to make sense on the spreadsheet, right? Sean Doolittle's on the front row. She loves spreadsheets. Sean, being generous is never going to make sense on the spreadsheet. But God doesn't work according to our spreadsheets. God works according to the principle of if we honor him, if we're generous, right, then the barns are full and the vats are bursting with wine. So be generous and watch what God does. Proverbs 22:9 says, "Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor." And Proverbs 28 says, "Whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse." And that second phrase is almost scary, because it's the idea of if we don't even have an excuse for, well, I didn't know about that need. I wasn't aware that was going on. It's the idea is we need to be aggressive in seeking out, where are there needs that I can meet? Where are there people who need help? Where are the areas where I can increase my generosity? In other words, look for needs and meet needs, because we master our money when we do that, when we show generosity. And then finally, we master our money when we learn contentment. Proverbs 30, verse 8 through 9 says, "Remove far from me falsehood and lying." And then listen to this phrase. It says, "Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God." I love that phrase. Give me neither poverty nor riches. And how do you define that? We don't have to define that. God knows exactly what we need. It's just our way of saying, God, give me exactly what I need to do what you've created me to do. God, give me exactly what I need to fulfill the calling that you have on my life. God, give me exactly what I need in order to be generous and helpful and compassionate toward other people. God, I don't need it for my own vanity. I don't need it for my own false sense of security. So God, I'm just trusting you that whatever you give me is for your glory and for your honor. So that the two warnings here, one is for the rich. The warning to the rich is be careful because you might fall into the trap of feeling self-sufficient. Like somehow I've done this, or I've made this, or I've earned this, rather than acknowledging that every good and perfect gift comes from God. And for the poor, it's a warning that sometimes they'll take matters into their own hands and forsake trusting God. In other words, okay, God, I'm poor and I don't know where my needs are coming from, so I'm going to disobey your word and I'm going to lie, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to steal, I'm going to provide for my needs in a way that does not honor you. Both of those are dangerous, dangerous positions to be in. So the book of Proverbs encourages us, tells us, to ask, to pray, God, don't give me poverty, nor give me riches. God, keep me right in that space where I'm dependent on you, but I'm able to be generous and compassionate with others. Philippians chapter 4, verse 12 through 13, Paul expresses how he experienced this matter of contentment. He says, I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. What a great deal of confidence and faith that Paul had. Paul said, when I'm lacking and I don't know where the next meal is, you know what, that's okay. I can trust God because I know God is going to give me the strength. And God, when you bless me, and when you bless me in an abundance and abounding ways, as Paul says, then God, I'm just going to trust you that you're going to keep my heart in check. You're going to keep my heart generous and compassionate and not egotistical. And God, don't let me forget you. So God, whichever circumstance I find myself in, God, I have found how to live that way and simply trusting you, knowing that whatever circumstance I find myself in, God has a purpose for it. God has a reason for it. Matt Redman wrote a song called Blessed Be Your Name, which expresses this so well. It says, Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful, where your streams of abundance flow. Blessed be your name. Blessed be your name. When I'm found in the desert place, though I walk through the wilderness, bless your name. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. When darkness closes in, Lord, I will say, Blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be your glorious name. When the sun's shining down on me, when the world's all as it should be, blessed be your name. But on the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering, blessed be your name. Let's pray together. God, that's where we want our hearts to be. God, you have blessed us, and we acknowledge that. God, the poorest among us would be considered wealthy and rich in other parts of the world. And so, God, we ask for your forgiveness when we've taken that for granted. But, God, we ask that you would give us hearts of generosity and compassion. God, we want to honor you with every ounce of who we are and what we have. And so, God, I just pray that our lives would be filled with opportunities to honor your name. And, God, give us the courage and the trust and the confidence in you to honor you with all that we have, with the very best as you bless us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, please stand with us this morning. We are going to sing this morning.